The desert wind carried dust across the rocky terrain as Master Chief Petty. Officer Jake Morrison adjusted his position behind the ridge. His team of Navy SEALs had been tracking a high-value target through the mountains of Afghanistan for 3 days. The intelligence reports suggested their target would be moving through this valley. But so far, they had seen nothing but empty landscape. Morrison lowered his binoculars and glanced at his watch. They had been in position for 6 hours, and the scorching sun was beginning to take its toll on his men. Sweat dripped down his face despite the tactical gear designed to keep him cool. This was his 15th deployment. He had learned that patience was often the difference between success and failure in these operations. "Chief, movement to the northwest," whispered Sergeant Collins through the radio. Morrison immediately raised his binoculars again, scanning the area Collins had indicated. They're barely visible against the rocky backdrop. He could make out several figures moving along a distant ridge. The distance was extreme, easily over 2 miles, but his trained eyes could detect the telltale signs of armed personnel. As Morrison studied the distant figures through his scope, he noticed something unusual. One of the figures seemed different from the others. While the rest moved in the typical pattern of a military convoy, this person moved with a strange confidence, almost casually. The figure appeared smaller than the others, and there was something about the way they carried themselves that didn't fit the profile they were expecting. "Collins, are you seeing what I'm seeing?" Morrison whispered into his radio. The distant figure had stopped and appeared to be setting up some kind of equipment. Through his high-powered scope, Morrison could make out what looked like a sniper rifle, but the person handling it seemed too small to be one of their known targets. The rest of Morrison's team began to take notice. Corporal Davis, their designated marksman, was studying the distant ridge through his own scope. "Chief, that's not our guy," Davis reported. "That person looks like they might be. I mean, it's hard to tell from this distance. But the build doesn't match our intelligence." Morrison felt a knot forming in his stomach. If this wasn't their target, then who was it? And why were they setting up a sniper position in this remote location? The tactical situation suddenly became much more complicated. Were they dealing with a rival faction? A local militia? Or something else entirely? The mysterious figure on the distant ridge completed their setup and seemed to be scanning the valley below. Morrison realized with growing concern that their position might be compromised. If this unknown sniper had the same high-grade equipment that his team possessed, they could potentially be spotted despite their careful camouflage. "All units, hold position and maintain silence," Morrison commanded quietly. His mind raced through the possibilities. They could retreat and regroup, but that would mean losing their target if he did appear. They could attempt to neutralize the unknown sniper, but at this distance, it would be an extremely difficult shot. And they still didn't know who they were dealing with. As Morrison continued to observe, he noticed the distant figure make a subtle adjustment to their rifle. The person's movements were precise and professional, indicating serious training. This wasn't some amateur with a hunting rifle. This was someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The wind shifted slightly, and Morrison adjusted his own position to maintain visual contact. Through his scope, he could see the mysterious sniper had settled into a comfortable shooting position. Their rifle appeared to be a high-end precision weapon, possibly military grade. The setup suggested someone with significant experience and resources. "Chief, we've got company," Collins whispered urgently. Morrison shifted his attention to the valley below, where their original target had finally appeared. A convoy of 3 vehicles was moving along the dirt road, exactly as intelligence had predicted. But now they had an unknown sniper in overwatch position, and Morrison had no idea whose side they were on. The situation had become a complex 3-way scenario. Morrison's team was tasked with observing and potentially eliminating their target. But the presence of the unknown sniper changed everything. Were they about to witness a competing operation? Or had they stumbled into someone else's mission entirely? As the convoy moved closer to the optimal engagement zone, Morrison made a decision that would change everything. Instead of focusing solely on their target, he decided to split his attention between the convoy and the mysterious sniper. Something told him that the real story was about to unfold on that distant ridge, not in the valley below. The convoy below moved steadily through the winding mountain road. Unaware that multiple sets of eyes were tracking their progress, Morrison watched as the lead vehicle navigated around a sharp bend, bringing it into what would be the perfect kill zone for the mysterious sniper on the distant ridge. The mathematics of the shot were staggering. He estimated the distance at nearly 3,000 meters, well beyond the range of most conventional sniper systems. Through his powerful scope, Morrison observed the unknown sniper make final adjustments to their weapon. The person's movements were methodical and calm, showing no signs of nervousness, despite the extreme difficulty of the shot they were apparently preparing to take. Morrison had worked with some of the best marksmen in the military, and he recognized the behavior of someone who was supremely confident in their abilities. "This is impossible," Sergeant Collins muttered through the radio. "Nobody makes shots at that range. The bullet drop alone would be... Morrison silenced him with a hand gesture. He was beginning to suspect that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The unknown sniper had positioned themselves with mathematical precision, accounting for wind patterns, elevation, and the natural movement of the target below. This wasn't luck or bravado. This was calculated expertise. The convoy continued its approach. With the second vehicle now entering the engagement zone, Morrison could see through his binoculars that the vehicles were armored, typical for high-value transport in this region. His original mission parameters had called for observation and intelligence gathering, but the presence of the unknown sniper had turned this into something entirely different. As Morrison watched, the distant figure adjusted their position slightly, compensating for a change in wind direction that Morrison himself had just noticed. The level of skill being displayed was remarkable. Whoever this person was, they had training that rivaled or exceeded anything Morrison had seen in his 15 years of special operations. "Chief, the lead vehicle has stopped," reported Corporal Davis. Morrison shifted his attention back to the convoy, where indeed the lead vehicle had come to a halt. The other two vehicles stopped behind it, maintaining tactical spacing. Through his scope, Morrison could see figures emerging from the vehicles, several of them carrying weapons. The timing seemed too perfect to be coincidental. Had the convoy detected the threat from the ridge? Or was this a planned stop? Morrison's tactical mind raced through the possibilities, trying to understand the dynamics of what he was observing. On the distant ridge, the mysterious sniper remained motionless, weapon trained on the stationary convoy. The shot would still be incredibly challenging, but with a stationary target, the odds improved significantly. Morrison found himself holding his breath, anticipating what might happen next. Minutes passed in tense silence. The convoy personnel below appeared to be conducting some kind of equipment check or briefing. They seemed relaxed, unaware of the potential threat watching them from nearly 2 miles away. Morrison realized that his team might be the only witnesses to whatever was about to unfold. "Movement on the ridge," Davis whispered. Morrison immediately focused his attention back to the unknown sniper. The figure was making subtle adjustments, and Morrison could see the distinctive muzzle of what appeared to be an M2010 enhanced sniper rifle. The weapon was capable of extreme range precision shooting, but the distance involved would push even this advanced system to its absolute limits. The wind conditions were variable, with gusts that would affect bullet trajectory significantly at such extreme range. Morrison watched as the sniper seemed to be reading the environment, waiting for the perfect moment when all conditions would align. The level of patience and skill being demonstrated was extraordinary. Through his scope, Morrison could see the convoy personnel gathering around the lead vehicle. One figure stood apart from the others, and Morrison recognized the profile from their intelligence briefings. This was indeed their target, the high-value individual they had been tracking for days. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Morrison. His team had spent considerable time and resources to get into position for this observation mission, only to find themselves witnessing someone else's operation. The question remained, who was the mysterious sniper, and what was their connection to the target below? As if sensing Morrison's thoughts, the distant figure made one final adjustment to their rifle. The shot was coming. Morrison realized he was about to witness either an impossible feat of marksmanship or a spectacular failure. At nearly 3,000 meters, with variable wind conditions and a partially concealed target, The odds were astronomical. The mysterious snipers settled into their final firing position, and Morrison could see the subtle body language changes that indicated an imminent shot. After 15 years of combat operations, he knew the signs. Someone was about to attempt what might be the longest confirmed sniper kill in history, and his team would be the only witnesses to it. The moment seemed to stretch forever as Morrison watched through his scope, every muscle in his body tense with anticipation. The mysterious sniper had been motionless for nearly 30 seconds, which in the world of precision shooting meant they were waiting for the perfect convergence of factors: wind, target position, and atmospheric conditions. Suddenly, Morrison saw the subtle flash of the muzzle brake on the distant ridge. The sound wouldn't reach them for several seconds due to the extreme distance, but his trained eye caught the telltale signs of the shot being fired. He immediately shifted his attention to the convoy below, knowing that the bullet would take several seconds to travel the enormous distance. Time seemed to slow as Morrison counted off the seconds. 3,000 meters meant a flight time of nearly 4 seconds, assuming the bullet maintained supersonic velocity for most of its journey. The physics involved were staggering. The bullet would drop several feet due to gravity, drift significantly due to wind, and lose substantial velocity over such an extreme distance. Holy ... double quotes, Collins started to whisper. But Morrison cut him off with a sharp gesture. They needed to maintain absolute silence to observe what happened next. In the valley below, the convoy personnel continued their activities, completely unaware that death was traveling toward them at over 2,000 feet per second. Morrison watched as their target, the high-valued individual they had been tracking, stepped away from the vehicle and moved toward an elevated position near the road. The timing was either incredibly unfortunate or impossibly precise. Through his scope, Morrison could see the man clearly, middle-aged, wearing traditional local dress, but with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. The impact came with shocking suddenness. Morrison saw the target suddenly collapse, and even at their extreme distance, he could tell the shot had found its mark. The other personnel around the convoy immediately dove for cover, scanning the surrounding terrain for threats they couldn't possibly see at such range. Jesus Christ, Davis breathed into his radio. Did that actually just happen? Morrison was already calculating angles and distances in his head. The shot had to have traveled at least 2,940 meters, possibly more, depending on the exact positions involved. He had witnessed what was quite possibly the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history, executed by an unknown individual with skills that defied belief. On the distant ridge, the mysterious sniper was already beginning to pack up their equipment. The movement was calm and methodical, showing no signs of haste or panic. This person had clearly planned their extraction route well in advance and was executing it with the same precision they had shown in, making the shot below in the valley. Chaos was beginning to unfold. The convoy personnel were frantically trying to establish security perimeters while dealing with their fallen leader. Radio chatter would be intense as they tried to figure out where the shot had come from and whether additional threats were present. Morrison made a tactical decision that surprised even himself. Instead of maintaining their original observation mission, he decided to try to intercept the unknown sniper. The professional curiosity was overwhelming. He needed to know who had just accomplished what seemed impossible. Collins, Davis, were moving to intercept the shooter, Morrison whispered into his radio. Pack it up. We're going cross-country. His team responded with the efficiency of seasoned professionals, quickly breaking down their observation post and preparing for movement. They would have to cover rough terrain quickly if they had any hope of reaching the area where the sniper had been. Positioned as they began their movement across the rocky landscape, Morrison couldn't shake the image of that impossibly precise shot. The unknown sniper had demonstrated skills that went far beyond conventional military training. The question that nagged at him was whether this person was an ally, an enemy, or something else entirely. The terrain was challenging, with loose rocks and steep inclines that slowed their progress. Morrison pushed his team hard, knowing that every minute of delay reduced their chances of making contact with the mysterious shooter. The professional part of his mind was already composing the after-action report that would have to explain how they had witnessed an impossible shot executed by an unknown individual. As they climbed toward the ridge where the shot had originated, Morrison began to notice subtle signs that someone had recently passed this way. Disturbed rocks, faint boot impressions in patches of sand, and broken vegetation marked a trail that led away from the shooting position. "Chief, whoever this is, they know fieldcraft," Collins observed quietly. "The trail is almost invisible, but it's there." Morrison nodded, his respect for the unknown sniper growing with each piece of evidence they discovered. This person was not only an extraordinary marksman, but also highly skilled in tactics and evasion. The combination suggested military training of the highest caliber. They reached the area where the shot had been taken just as the sound of helicopters began to echo through the valley below. The convoy's backup was arriving, and the area would soon be swarming with personnel trying to determine what had happened. Morrison realized that his window for tracking the mysterious sniper was rapidly closing. Looking out across the landscape from the shooting position, Morrison gained a new appreciation for the difficulty of the shot he had witnessed. The angle, the distance, the wind conditions, everything had been against success. Yet somehow the unknown sniper had made it look routine. Morrison knelt at the exact spot where the mysterious sniper had taken the shot. Studying the ground for any clues about the person's identity, the position had been chosen with incredible tactical awareness, perfect sightlines to the target area, multiple escape routes, and natural concealment from aerial observation. "Chief, look at this," Davis called quietly from a few meters away. He was pointing to a small impression in the sandy soil between two rocks. Morrison moved over and immediately recognized what his teammate had found: a partial boot print that was significantly smaller than what any of them would have made. The implications hit Morrison like a physical blow. The boot print suggested that the mysterious sniper might be a woman. In his 15 years of special operations, he had worked with some exceptional female operators, but none who specialized in extreme range precision shooting. The realization added another layer of impossibility to what he had already witnessed. Collins was examining the area where the rifle had been positioned. Noting the small bipod impressions and the careful way the shooting position had been constructed, whoever this was, they spent time setting this up perfectly. Look at how they cleared the shooting lane without disturbing the surrounding vegetation. This is professional work at the highest level. Morrison studied the tactical situation from the sniper's perspective. The shooter had needed to account for multiple variables: the convoy's timing, wind patterns, potential interference, and extraction routes. The level of planning required suggested either inside information or incredibly detailed reconnaissance. The trail leading away from the position continued to show signs of expert fieldcraft. The mysterious sniper was moving efficiently across terrain that would challenge even experienced military personnel. Morrison's team followed the subtle signs, but he was beginning to realize that they were unlikely to catch up with someone who had planned this operation so thoroughly as they tracked across the rocky landscape. Morrison's radio crackled with distant chatter from the convoy below. Search teams were being deployed, helicopters were conducting aerial sweeps, and roadblocks were being established throughout the region. The target's death had triggered a massive response, but all of it was focused in the wrong direction. "Movement ahead," whispered Collins, pointing toward a ridge about 400 meters away. Morrison raised his binoculars and caught a glimpse of a figure moving with practiced stealth across the skyline. Even at this distance, he could tell that the person was smaller than a typical male soldier and moved with a fluid efficiency that spoke of exceptional training. Morrison made a decision that would later be questioned in multiple debriefings. Instead of calling in the sighting to coordinate a larger search, he decided to continue the pursuit with just his small team. Something about this situation felt personal now. He needed to understand who they were dealing with. The chase continued across increasingly difficult terrain. The mysterious sniper was leading them through areas that required technical climbing skills and intimate knowledge of the local geography. Morrison began to suspect that this person had not only planned the shooting, but had also prepared multiple escape routes. Through this mountainous region, after 2 hours of pursuit, Morrison's team reached a natural choke point where the trail passed between two large rock formations. It was the perfect place for an ambush, and Morrison's tactical instincts screamed warnings. He signaled his team to halt and approach the area with extreme caution as they carefully moved through the narrow passage. Morrison noticed something that made him freeze. Scratched into the rock face was a small symbol, barely visible unless you knew where to look. It was a marking he had seen before. In classified briefings about elite international operatives. "Chief, we need to talk," Collins said quietly, pointing to his own discovery. On a flat rock surface, someone had left a small pile of stones arranged in a specific pattern. It was a message, though Morrison wasn't immediately sure what it meant. The realization hit him gradually. They weren't pursuing some random sniper who had happened upon their target. This was a planned operation by someone with access to the same intelligence networks that had guided Morrison's own mission. The question was whether this person was working for an ally or an adversary. Davis had moved ahead and was signaling for them to join him. When Morrison reached his position, he found himself looking down into a small valley where a motorcycle was parked near a barely visible trail. The vehicle was positioned for a quick escape, and fresh tire tracks showed that someone had recently tested the route. "We're not going to catch them," Morrison said quietly, stating what all three men had begun to realize. The mysterious sniper had planned this operation with military precision and had anticipated pursuit. Every move had been calculated to stay ahead of any response team, as if to confirm his assessment. Morrison heard the distant sound of a motorcycle engine starting. Somewhere in the maze of trails and valleys ahead, their quarry was beginning the final phase of their escape. The sound echoed off the canyon walls, making it impossible to determine the exact direction. Morrison stood at the edge of the valley, watching the empty landscape and trying to process what his team had witnessed. They had seen an impossible shot executed with casual precision, tracked one of the most skilled operators he had ever encountered, and discovered evidence that suggested this was part of a larger intelligence operation. The questions multiplied in his mind. Who was the female sniper who had just accomplished what might be the longest confirmed kill in history? What organization did she work for? And why had she eliminated the same target that Morrison's team had been sent to observe? 3 days after the incident, Morrison found himself in a secure briefing room at Bagram Air Base, facing a panel of intelligence officers who seemed more interested in what he didn't know than what he had observed. The debriefing had been going on for hours, the same questions being asked repeatedly in slightly different ways. "Master Chief Morrison, you're certain about the distance of the shot?" asked Colonel Patricia Hayes, the senior intelligence officer leading the session. Her tone suggested she was still struggling to believe the report that had landed on her desk. Morrison had calculated and recalculated the numbers dozens of times. "Yes, ma'am. Based on our GPS positions and the location of the target, the minimum distance was 2,940 meters. Could have been as much as 3,100 meters depending." On the exact shooting position, the room fell silent as the implications sank in. If Morrison's measurements were accurate, they were discussing what would be the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history, accomplished by an unknown operator who had vanished without a trace. Major Robert Chen, the ballistics expert assigned to the case, leaned forward. "Master Chief, the M2010 system has an effective range of about 1,200 meters. What you're describing is physically possible, but would require perfect conditions and extraordinary skill. Are you absolutely certain this wasn't some kind of explosive device or alternative weapon system?" Morrison had anticipated this question. "Sir, I observed the muzzle flash, the shooter's position, and the target's reaction. It was definitely a precision rifle shot. The timing, the single impact. The way the target fell, everything was consistent with a sniper engagement." Colonel Hayes consulted her notes. "And you believe the shooter was female?" "The boot print evidence and visual confirmation during our pursuit strongly suggests that." "Yes, ma'am." Morrison paused, knowing his next statement would sound even more incredible. She moved across terrain that would challenge experienced mountain troops, maintained perfect noise discipline, and executed an extraction that kept her ahead of aerial search assets. The intelligence officers exchanged glances that Morrison couldn't interpret. he had the distinct impression that they knew more about this situation than they were revealing. The questions were too specific, focused on details that wouldn't matter unless they already had some context for what had happened. Master Chief, in your professional opinion, what level of training would be required for someone to accomplish what you witnessed? Colonel Hayes asked. Morrison considered his answer carefully. Ma'am, I've worked with the best marksmen in SOCOM, Marine Force Recon, and Army Special Forces. What I witnessed exceeded anything I've seen in 15 years of special operations. This person would need elite military sniper training, advanced ballistics knowledge, expert fieldcraft skills, and extensive experience in high-stress operations. Major Chen made a note. And the tactical planning? The position, selection, escape routes, timing? Professional-grade intelligence work, Morrison replied without hesitation. This wasn't opportunistic. Someone had detailed information about our target's movements, the terrain, and probably our own mission parameters. The room grew quiet again. Morrison sensed that his assessment had confirmed something the officers already suspected. After a moment, Colonel Hayes closed her folder and stood up. Master Chief Morrison, I need you to understand that this briefing is classified at the highest levels. You and your team are not to discuss these events with anyone outside this room. That includes other special operations personnel, military intelligence, and especially any media contacts. Morrison nodded, though his curiosity was now overwhelming. Ma'am, can you tell me anything about who we encountered out there? Colonel Hayes paused at the door. Let's just say that you witnessed the work of someone we've been trying to identify for quite some time. Your report may be the best intelligence we've gathered on this individual. After the officers left, Morrison sat alone in the briefing room, trying to piece together the fragments of information he had gathered. The mysterious sniper wasn't just skilled, she was someone who had been operating long enough to attract the attention of high-level intelligence agencies. His phone buzzed with a message from Alliance. Chief, you need to see the news reports about the convoy incident. Morrison accessed the secure news feed and found multiple articles about the death of the target they had been observing. The official reports claimed that the individual had been killed by a precision strike from unknown forces at extreme range. The distance was not specified, and there was no mention of the investigation that Morrison knew was vetted. What caught his attention was a small detail buried in one of the longer articles. A local witness claimed to have seen a woman on a motorcycle leaving the area shortly after the incident. The witness described her as moving like a ghost through the mountains. Morrison leaned back in his chair, processing this new information. The mysterious sniper had been operating in this region long enough to be noticed by local civilians, which suggested either multiple operations or an extended period of reconnaissance. Either possibility raised troubling questions about how someone could operate undetected in one of the most monitored regions in the world. His thoughts were interrupted by his secure phone ringing. The caller ID showed only a numerical code, indicating a classified communication channel. Morrison here, Master Chief. This is Colonel Hayes. I have some additional information that might interest you. Can you come to my office immediately? 10 minutes later, Morrison found himself looking at a wall covered with photographs, maps, and intelligence reports. Colonel Hayes gestured to a specific section of the display. Master Chief. Meet Ghost. That's the code name we've assigned to the individual you encountered. Over the past 18 months, we've connected her to at least 6 high-value eliminations across 3 different countries. In every case, the shots were taken at extreme range with perfect precision. Morrison studied the map, noting the locations marked with red pins. The pattern suggested someone with access to multiple intelligence networks and the ability to move freely across international borders. Ma'am, do we know which organization she works for? Colonel Hayes smiled grimly. That's the million-dollar question, Master Chief. And finding the answer just became your new mission. 2 weeks later, Morrison found himself in the mountains of northern Pakistan, leading a joint task force specifically assembled to track down the mysterious sniper known as Ghost. The intelligence picture had grown significantly since his initial encounter. and what they had learned was both impressive and disturbing. The task force included specialists from multiple agencies: CIA, operatives, military intelligence analysts, and elite tracking teams. Morrison had been given operational command due to his direct experience with their target. The mission parameters were clear: locate, identify, and if possible, capture the individual responsible for what intelligence analysts now called impossible kills. "Chief, we've got something," announced Sarah Rodriguez, the CIA senior analyst assigned to the operation. She was studying satellite imagery on her laptop, comparing it to the patterns they had identified from previous ghost operations. "Look at these elevation profiles from the Hindu Kush region." Morrison examined the data Rodriguez was highlighting. The terrain analysis showed several positions that would allow extreme range, shots into valleys where known terrorist leaders had been operating. The mathematical precision of the position selection was remarkable. Someone had identified shooting lanes that most military planners would never have considered. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson, the Army intelligence representative, joined their discussion. "We've intercepted communications suggesting that several terrorist cells have changed their operational patterns specifically to avoid these mountain ridges. They're afraid of someone they call the mountain ghosts." The psychological impact was fascinating to Morrison. A single individual had altered the tactical behavior of multiple enemy organizations, simply through demonstration of impossible capabilities. It was a form of warfare that went beyond physical elimination of targets. "Sir, we may have found something significant," reported Sergeant First Class Williams, their communications specialist. "Local sources have identified a pattern of motorcycle sightings in remote mountain villages. Always a single rider, always moving at night, always heading toward areas where we later discover surveillance positions." Morrison studied the map where Williams was marking the reported sightings. The pattern suggested someone who was conducting detailed reconnaissance before each operation. The level of preparation was extraordinary, with some surveillance positions apparently occupied for weeks before target opportunities presented themselves. As the task force established their forward operating base in a valley that provided access to multiple suspected ghost positions, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His instincts, honed by 15 years of combat operations, told him that someone was aware of their presence. "Chief, take a look at this," Collins called from his position, monitoring radio intercepts. "We're picking up chatter from the local Taliban cells. They're discussing something they call the American woman who shoots from the clouds." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. If local terrorist organizations were specifically referencing an American woman, it suggested that Ghost was not only known to them but had been operating in this region long enough to develop a reputation. The implications were staggering. Rodriguez approached with a new piece of intelligence that would change everything. "Chief Langley just sent me something interesting. They've been analyzing the ballistics from all 6 confirmed ghost kills, and they've identified a unique signature in the bullet fragments recovered from the DE." Morrison leaned in to examine the ballistics report. The analysis showed that Ghost was using custom-manufactured ammunition, not standard military issue. The bullets had been precisely crafted for extreme-range shooting, with specifications that suggested access to the most advanced ballistics technology available. "This isn't just skill and training," Rodriguez continued. "This is someone with access to resources that very few organizations possess. The ammunition alone would cost thousands of dollars per round. That's assuming you could even acquire the materials legally." Thompson added another disturbing detail. "The satellite analysis shows that Ghost has been active in this region for at least 2 years, possibly longer. We've identified potential shooting positions from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northern India. The operational area covers thousands of square miles of some of the most difficult terrain in the world." Morrison was beginning to understand the magnitude of what they were facing. This wasn't a rogue operator or a terrorist sniper. Ghost represented something far more sophisticated, possibly a state-sponsored asset or someone working for an organization with significant resources and intelligence capabilities. As night fell over their forward operating base, Morrison established security protocols and began planning their first reconnaissance mission. The intelligence suggested that ghosts might be active in a valley system about 20 kilometers to the north, where several high-value targets were known to operate, Chief. "We've got movement," reported Davis from his observation post. "Single individual, moving along the ridgeline about 2 clicks north. Moving with purpose, not patrol behavior." Morrison grabbed his night vision equipment and moved to Davis's position. Through the advanced optics, he could make out a figure moving with the fluid efficiency he remembered from their first encounter. The person was carrying what appeared to be a precision rifle system and was heading toward the same valley system they had planned to investigate. "That's her," Morrison whispered, feeling a mixture of professional respect and tactical concern. "That's Ghost." The figure on the ridge seemed to pause as if sensing observation. For a moment that seemed to stretch forever, Morrison had the unsettling feeling that she was looking directly at his position. Then she resumed movement, disappearing into the rocky terrain with the same ghost-like efficiency that had earned her code. Named Rodriguez joined them at the observation post. "Chief, if that's really her, then we have a problem. She's moving toward the same operational area we identified for tomorrow's mission. Either this is an incredible coincidence, or ... Morrison finished the thought that none of them wanted to voice. Or she knows exactly what we're planning. The possibility that Ghost had access to their operational intelligence raised questions that would keep Morrison awake for the rest of the night. The confrontation Morrison had been anticipating for weeks came at dawn, in a way he never could have predicted. Instead of tracking Ghost through the mountains, she found him. Morrison's secure satellite phone rang, just as his team was preparing to move out on their reconnaissance. "Mission, Master Chief Morrison." The voice was calm, professional, and unmistakably female. "I believe we need to talk." Morrison signaled frantically to Rodriguez to begin tracing the call. "Who is this?" "I think you know. You've been tracking me for quite some time now. Your efforts are impressive. They're also unnecessary." There was a slight accent that Morrison couldn't immediately place. American, but with subtle influences that suggested extensive time abroad. "Where are you?" Morrison asked, scanning the surrounding ridges through his binoculars. "Close enough to have watched your team establish their base camp. Far enough away to avoid your current search patterns." The voice carried a hint of amusement. "You're very good at what you do, Master Chief. But you're hunting someone who doesn't want to be your enemy." Rodriguez was making frantic gestures, indicating that the call was encrypted and bouncing off multiple satellites. Tracing would be impossible. Morrison made a decision that would later be questioned by his superiors. "What do you want?" "To meet, face to face. There are things you need to understand about what you witnessed that day." The woman paused. "And there are things I need to know about why you're hunting me instead of the people who actually threaten American interests in this region." Morrison felt the weight of command decisions pressing down on him. "How do I know this isn't a trap?" The laugh that came through the phone was genuinely amused. "Master Chief, if I wanted to eliminate your team, I would have done it 2 nights ago when you were all gathered around that campfire discussing your plans. I was less than 800 meters away." The implications sent a chill through Morrison's body. Ghost had been close enough to take multiple shots at his entire team, yet had chosen to remain hidden. Either she was telling the truth about not being an enemy, or she was playing a game far more sophisticated than anything he had encountered. "There's a plateau about 3 kilometers northeast of your position," Ghost continued. "Meet me there in 2 hours. Come alone and bring your M2010. I want to show you something that will change your understanding of what you witnessed." The line went dead, leaving Morrison staring at his phone while his team looked at him with expressions of disbelief and concern. Collins was the first to speak. "Chief, can't seriously be considering this." Morrison was already calculating the tactical implications. The plateau Ghost had mentioned was defensible terrain that would give her multiple escape routes, while limiting his options for backup or extraction. It was exactly where a skilled operator would choose for a meeting they wanted to control. "Rodriguez, what's your assessment?" Morrison asked the CIA analyst. "It could be a trap. But her behavior pattern suggests otherwise," Rodriguez replied, consulting her laptop. "Every Ghost operation we've documented has been precisely targeted eliminations of known terrorist leaders. There's been no collateral damage, no attacks on military personnel, and no anti-American activity that we can identify. Thompson added his perspective from the Army intelligence angle. Chief, if this individual has the capabilities we've observed, she could have eliminated your team multiple times over the past weeks. The fact that she hasn't suggests either professional courtesy or shared objectives. Morrison made his decision. I'm going to the meeting. Rodriguez, I want continuous satellite coverage of the area. Collins positioned the team for overwatch, but maintained distance. If this goes wrong, I don't want anyone else caught in the crossfire 2 hours later. Morrison climbed the rocky path leading to the plateau. His M2010 slung across his back and his senses on high alert. The terrain was exactly as challenging as he had expected, with multiple positions that could conceal a sniper and limited approaches that made tactical movement difficult. As he reached the edge of the plateau, Morrison saw her for the first time without optical magnification. Ghost was sitting calmly on a rock outcropping, her own M2010 propped against a nearby boulder. She was smaller than he had expected, probably no more than 5'6". With the lean build of someone who spent considerable time in physically demanding environments, her face was partially concealed by tactical sunglasses and a desert-pattern head wrap. But Morrison could see enough to confirm that she was indeed a woman. Probably in her early 30s, with the confident bearing of an experienced operator. What struck him immediately was how relaxed she seemed, as if this was a routine meeting between colleagues rather than a confrontation. Between Hunter and Quarry, Master Chief Morrison, she said, standing and extending her hand. I'm Captain Alina Vasquez, formerly of the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Morrison shook her hand, noting the firm grip and calloused palms that confirmed extensive weapons training. Delta Force? Then you're American military? Was Vasquez corrected? I've been operating independently for the past 3 years. She gestured toward her rifle. Would you like to see how that shot was possible? Morrison nodded, his professional curiosity overcoming his tactical caution. Vasquez moved to her weapon and began explaining the modifications she had made to the standard M2010 system. Custom barrel with enhanced rifling. Modified bolt action for improved consistency. Specialized optics with ballistic computer integration. An ammunition that I manufacture myself using materials that aren't available. Through normal military channels, she looked up at Morrison. The shot you witnessed was at 2,940 meters. With a crosswind of 8 to 12 miles per hour and a temperature gradient that affected bullet trajectory by approximately 6 inches, Morrison examined the weapon, recognizing modifications that would cost tens of thousands of dollars and require access to military-grade manufacturing facilities. Who do you work for? Vasquez smiled grimly. That's complicated. Officially, I work for myself. Practically, I receive intelligence and operational support from organizations that prefer not to be identified. My targets are always individuals who pose significant threats to American interests, but who can't be eliminated through conventional military operations. So you're an assassin, Morrison stated. I'm a solution to problems that conventional warfare can't address, Vasquez replied. The man you were observing 3 weeks ago was responsible for planning attacks that would have killed hundreds of American soldiers. Your orders were to observe and gather intelligence. Mine were to eliminate the threat permanently. Morrison felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together. You had access to our mission parameters. I have access to a lot of things. Master Chief, the question is whether you're going to try to complete your current mission, or whether you're going to listen to a proposition that might interest you. Vasquez shouldered her rifle with practiced ease. Because the real enemies in this region aren't the ones you've been tracking. They're the ones who've been tracking you. Before Morrison could respond, his radio crackled with Collins' urgent voice. Chief, we've got multiple aircraft inbound to your position. They're not showing friendly identification. Vasquez was already moving toward the edge of the plateau. Master Chief, it appears our conversation will have to continue another time. But remember what I said about the real enemies? She paused at the cliff edge. That shot was Launchen Jobai Sisher meters. Next time someone tells you it's impossible, remind them that impossible is just another word for difficult. With that, she rappelled over the edge of the plateau, disappearing into the rocky terrain below with the same efficiency Morrison had witnessed weeks before. As helicopters appeared on the horizon, Morrison realized that his mission had just become infinitely more complicated, and that the woman he had been hunting might be the key to understanding threats he hadn't even known existed.